into the turpentine industry of North Florida. Does anyone know anything about the turpentine industry? Just a show of hands. Preston knows a little of that. Very cool. So, throughout this presentation, I'm going to be showing some artifacts that you guys see up here. If you guys have any questions, just try to let me get through the slide, and then I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Extremely informal presentation. Also, I am admittedly not the best presentation giver, so just bear with me, because this is the first time I've done this one. Thank you. Okay, so the turpentine industry, often referred to as the naval store industry, originates in colonial times. However, it got its start in Native American times. The Native Americans would use gum rosin from the pine trees for a numerous amount of different things. Medicine, basket weaving, they would use it to caulk their canoes that they built. In addition to, they would use it to attach projectile points to their bows and arrows. So while we refined it and processed it and got it dialed in the early 1900s, the Native Americans were ahead of us by roughly 14,000 years. So as I mentioned, the turpentine industry, often referred to as naval store, and it got that name because of its relation to the naval industry. A lot of ships in the 1900s were built with wood, so turpentine was what they used to caulk and preserve the ships, as well as all their masting and rigging. What you're looking at here is a picture in Savannah, Georgia, of a turpentine, basically a plant, if you will, and that's all the barrels of turpentine that you see. If you notice in the background, it's right next to some ships there. That's how important it was to the industry. So while North Florida and the turpentine belts processed and harvested a lot of the turpentine, a lot of the refinement process was actually done in other places. All right, show of hands. Who has used any of these products in this room? Anybody? Really? Okay. Hopefully not with the turpentine in it. As you see here, you can break up anything from a cough and simultaneously strip your paint with it. So this was admittedly a little bit before medical research what it was today, but you kind of see all the different uses. As I said, paint stripping, cough, spirits turpentine, all this, right? So a lot of different uses for turpentine besides for the shipbuilding industry. All right, so next slide. I got a question for you guys. I got little hints for you too. Let's see if you can get it. Why was turpentine industry so big in North Florida? Anyone? Hey, there we go, cool, because we got a lot of pine trees, right? In order to harvest turpentine, you need a lot of trees that produce it. So Florida was robust with pine trees. We have a lot of slash pines, we have a lot of longleaf pines, and that made our region ideal for harvesting. So this is our region, as well as some other regions, and this is what is commonly known as the Turpentine Belt. This is roughly, if you look, most of the production was done in Georgia and Florida for turpentine, with a little bit in South Carolina. It extends, but the majority of it was done, right in this region right here. Fun fact, I don't know if anyone in the room is an avid turkey hunter or not, but this line right here of kind of Florida, that is also the line between the split for an Osceola turkey in their range and a northern turkey. And my thought process is it's probably because that's where all the slash pines start and the swamping is. So we have two different types of turkeys in Florida, and you can find both of them here. And that line matches up to where one begins and one ends. Fun fact. So railroads made a huge difference in the early 19th century in regards to turpentine production and the ability for the economy to grow. As you see here, you had a bunch of people loading up the barrels, and you had it being hauled off to presumably places like Savannah after it was harvested from the tree. It also made it a lot easier to set up new encampments inside of the turpentine camps. So before, you have to have workers that harvest all this. So before, you were limited to wagon, horse. With the expansion of rails, you could go much deeper into new parts of the South and explore all. And oftentimes, as you'll see in this next picture here, they would set up the camps right on the railroad. So, as you see, we got a railroad here. Very modest worker houses. This was tough ruling work. Originally, it was done by slaves, later transitioned into effectively a peonage system where they paid commissary commission to the workers, but it was only good to be used at the store. So effectively, it was just a different form of slavery because they never paid you enough to catch up in the bills that you had. When that dried up, because of, civil rights era and all that kind of stuff, they said, hey, who could we exploit next? So they turned to the convict leasing program and they said, let's get some prisoners to do it. We'll dive into that a little bit. All right, so this is a good example of kind of one of the communities. You see you have all the houses lined up. It's literally smack dab in the middle of a forest. And if you can kind of put yourself back in time to before Palm Coast was the place, this entire area was made up of turpentine camps. So just imagine this being Flagler County, even though this isn't an actual picture of Flagler County. This would have been something similar to how the style was set up of this localized area with workers. So one other thing too is there's a measurement term that's used for this, and it's called a crop. So you'd often hear old-timers say, oh, our operation works 5, 6, 7 crops. And a crop is 10,000 trees. So I don't know if you guys know how many 10,000 mature pine trees are, but it is an expansive area. So these operations were thousands and thousands of acres wide, even though the housing was only in one area. So this is some of the script that I was talking about. I have a few actually, and if you guys promise not to steal it, we can. I got my city historian. We'll pass them around. So instead of cash, which by the way, there was cash at this time, right? We're talking 1900s all the way, or 1880s all the way up to 1960s. So tons of different types of money, gold, silver, all sorts of things. They chose to pay them in worthless pieces of aluminum so that there was no scrap metal, there was no actual monetary value. And these were good at the commissary stores. Commissary stores were often ran, owned, and operated by the employer. So they managed the pricing, they managed how much money you got, when you got paid, and all of your money and purchases and needs were in this store for food, your family, everything. And I want to remind you guys that this wasn't just adult males or adult people working, there was also whole families in these camps. So there was children, there was wives, there was elders, there was all types of people in these camps, and it was a little city effectively, very tight city. So most of the turpentine workers were African American, and many faced very harsh conditions. Not all the camps were harsh, but there are some examples of ones that were just downright awful. You get varying degrees of cruelty throughout the regions. Some parts of the deeper south were worse than others. Here parts of Florida, the camps were very happy, and unless things got out of hand or fights, it varies across the board. I was not there, so I cannot give first-hand accounts, but we can read some of the stories, and we will read one later from some of the accounts of the people who were there. So, convict lease, as I said, originally done by African Americans through slavery in the early part, and then transitioned onto the peonage system. Then, when they needed new workers, they decided to lease convicts. Maybe reasonable, right? We see a lot of guys today picking up trash on the side of the road that are incarcerated. However, these conditions were a lot different. A lot of the times, the charges would be made up just so that these guys were thrown in jail and able to work. A lot of time, there wasn't charges at all, right? It was just completely fictitious. And then additionally, they would be charged furthermore under the care of the supervising facility, and then additional charges could be added potentially so that their sentence was then longer, so then they could work longer. The way that the convict leasing program worked is that the convicts were leased, but the state was paid. As always, death taxes, guaranteed. State wanted to tax them, so they set up a system where the owners of the plantation, or the owners of the camps basically paid the state for their time and labor. So it became a lucrative business on both ends, if you So, we are going to touch base on one of the bad stories of this industry. This is Baker County, you see highlighted. We are Flagler County, so the second one up from the blue there. Baker County is in North Florida. My girlfriend, Crystal, is actually from Baker County, and she actually knows this family that still has the farm. We want to hopefully talk to them and interview them about this. Not the best part of the story, but a part that's important to me. So the Knapp brothers were a Turpentine empire that came under fire in the 1930s for conditions in Baker County. Reports describe peonage-like practices and leased convicts forced into long work hours under armed guards, prisoners, whipped for minor infractions, and laborers trapped by fabricated debts. In 1934, the scandal exploded when testimony revealed that a young prisoner, Arthur Malley, died after severe beatings in a Knapp camp, prompting statewide outrage. The grand jury condemned this operation as inhumane, exposing corruption in the local sheriff's office, where Sheriff R.H. Knapp played a dual role as both a lawman and a beneficiary of the penal system. So, just shows you how intertwined some of the politics were back in the day. Throughout, though prosecutions were limited, the scandal helped push forward to curtail convict leasing and cast the Knapp operation as one of the state's most notorious examples of industrial abuse. At this point in the story, I always like to just put a disclaimer. You know, some of these people are still alive, descendants of them. I don't like to make future descendants pay for the sins of their grandparents. So in telling these stories, we don't say it to do harm on the family's name or anything like that, but just to expose sort of what was going on back in the day. And as I said, we're trying to coordinate with the future generations down to help better tell the story from all perspectives of it. So I am going to read you a little thing here. So WN Phosphate near Ellison in Citrus County, 80 convicts, 7 white men and 3 women. There were 6 deaths in the past year, including 1 in an attempt to kill and escape. Your committee found that this, by the way, this is an excerpt from one of the committee members who served to go and do the review process for this. So he said, your committee found the deplorable condition of affairs at this camp and not present in language the true situation. By inspection, observation, evidence, and investigation, we found a system of cruelty and inhumane practice at this camp that would be hard to realize unless it could be seen and heard direct. The prisoners presented a general pitiable condition, and the complaint was general, universal, and corroborative of what your committee observed. There was an insufficiency of food as evidenced by appearance of the prisoners, severe and cruel punishment as evidenced by the lash cuts of the prisoners. There was a failure to supply the sick with food, there was no hospital arrangements, the well prisoners being compelled to sleep all mixed in with the sick men in the cell, which was entirely inadequate for the comfort of the men. There was a failure to supply any kind of bedding except for pine floor and 1 blanket for each person, even during the severe weather winter nights. There was an abundant evidence that there had been bedding furnished this camp up to within 2 days of the arrival, as also an abundance of corroborative evidence that the blankets had not been washed for more than a year until about 2 days before the committee arrived. That just kind of gives you a little general overall of what these conditions were like out there. Not ideal, and then mixed with that too, this was being done all year round in Florida, hot weather, just not great overall environment, extremely tough conditions. So, what was life like in the camp? Well, in the camps, gambling was a common pastime in many places. A lot of the camp management tolerated it, let it happen until, things got out of hand, someone got stabbed, or got into a place. But a lot of times gambling was actually a tool that was used to help pacify/codify the workers to keep them happy. It did lead to a lot of issues within camps, as well as alcohol consumption. We'll get into a very interesting story I will share with you guys later about that. But as you see here, they would gamble anything from scripts, the pinch coins, to cigarettes, to anything that they could get their hands on. These were some of the children living in the Turpentine camps. As I said, this was multi-generational. This was not just a group of people. Until the convict leasing program, this was families effectively, right? This was whole units of people that were in these camps, that were working, that made up the rhythm of the Turpentine industry. Their homes were usually simple, crowded cabins, daily life often revolved around chores, helping with getting water, tending to your younger siblings, gathering kindling, spending a lot of time in the woods. It wasn't much to do in these camps. So yeah. When they transferred it, there was supposed to be a picture there of a guy chipping, but that's okay. So now we're going to get into the actual work of the turpentine industry, so you guys kind of understand. Gave you a little background. So I wanted to start off with this, even though my picture's missing. Even under the most favorable circumstances, turpentine work was difficult, dirty, physically exhausting, and often dangerous. Pines, normally longleaf, were prepared for turpentining in the winter months when the sap was down. Workers first placed the cups and gutters about 10 inches above the base of the tree in the V-shaped cuts, which were deep enough to reach the resin ducts, and about 12 to 16 inches wide. So we're going to get into the first part of this, which is, how did you pick a tree? Well, you need a tree gauge for that. Originally, when they first started, they were chipping every tree that they could find. Conservation always comes out on top. They really quickly realized if you chip every tree, you're going to kill a lot of trees in the process. And if you kill all your trees, you don't have anything in the future to chip into and to harvest. So they came up with a tree gauge. It's just a 10-inch gauge, literally as simple as it sounds. You walk up, put it on the tree. If it fits over it, don't chip that one. If it doesn't fit over it, you have a good tree to chip. Here we have, so, as I mentioned, chip a tree. These trees were mature trees, and what would happen is after chipping, they would come in and they would put these gutters in to guide the sap that goes down to collect into the hurdy pots. One second. This marking is what's typically known as a cat face. It's you can kind of see why. The V shape at the top resembles cat ears, so they called it a cat face tree. So these are the chippers that were used, and Preston is going to hop up here. We actually have one to pass around and kind of show you guys. These are not light. Yeah. Extremely heavy at the bottom. There you go. And yeah, a gentleman walk around the woods all day. They would start low on the tree, and then they would work their way up higher. And I can show you in the next picture here. So you would start low on the tree, and then you'd work your way up high, and you'd just make, there you go, layers at a time. You would do a couple layers, you would set a gutter, and then originally, we'll get into it, the sap went into a cup. There's a few different types of cups, but originally there was a base box that we will discuss, and I can show you a picture of. So after you do a few layers, sap drips in, come back, scrape out all the sap, put it in your pail. They would chip a few more layers, move it up, and continue the process until they couldn't reach her, until the tree fell down pretty much. So, spoke about the cups. This is a hurdy cup. The hurdy cup was invented in the early 1900s. I'm actually going to bounce up real quick. The reason it was invented is because this was the original extraction method. So they would clear the tree, cat face it, and then create basically a bowl in the bottom of the tree itself. The problem with this is that when all that turpentine settled in the base of the tree, and in the process of digging out the base of the tree, what do you think happened to the tree? The tree died. So not a very good method. Therefore, in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, Mr. Dr. Hurdy invented the hurdy cup. So that is what is the most common. When people think of the turpentine industry, they often think of the hurdy cup. We have one of those somewhere around here. This is an original one. All of this is my stuff except for the chipper that Preston's passing around. You find these every once in a while. We are raffling this one off, so you can take a piece home with you. Tickets are $1 a piece. My stepson Emery over there is going to draw it out. He's also, just so you guys know, fun fact about Emery, also a turpentine explorer. He's probably found more pots than you have. He's 10. So they are out there. But if you see on the design, there's a hole in the back of it. What that did is that would hook up to the tree right here, and then that would nail that in and set it, and then the gutter would sit going into it right above it there. Downside of a hurdy pot. Anyone? Down. They break, and what else? Yeah. And heavy. Extremely heavy. So, in the later times, they came up with a tin version. Tin version, you can throw on the ground, doesn't break, a lot lighter to carry, easy to stack, a whole nine. Also here, you'll say, what is going on with this tree? So we see a normal cat face with the tin set up in the gutters. If you notice, this is a really good example of a double-faced cat tree. So oftentimes they would cut two faces into the same tree and run it on both sides. I have personally seen a few versions of a double-faced tree. I've heard rumors of three-sided trees. I've never seen one in person before, but supposedly there's a few that exist out there. But yeah, they were happy to chip away out there. So this is a McCoy cup. This is the metal one. It's called the McCoy. You got McCoy and you got a Hurdy. The McCoy cup was a lot easier to carry around, as I said. Also, too, I wanted to include this picture because you see, I don't know how familiar people are with the actual sap that runs off of the pine tree, but if you look right here, there's an unrubbing it, and it's not moving. So it's got to be hot, very hot, to get the pine sap to move. A lot of this work was done. They would chip the trees, prep the trees in the early winter, and then into the summer months, they would go out and actually collect it because that's when the resin is flowing because of the heat and the temperature in the area. This is a great example of it. All flows down. Guy goes out there with his pinky up, inspects it, checks the quality. There's a bunch of different type of grades of turpentine, which if I was teaching a college class would be like the next course. Color grades, different variations, what the product was used for. Maybe in a future presentation I'll get into that. But for the most part, they just had the sap go into the tree and then they put it into barrels. But there was different qualities and grades, if you would almost like a fine wine basically. There were guys that took very, very prestigious care, and the colors ranged from dark, 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 almost black, to effectively crystal clear in some areas. There was like some super high grade white lightning turpentine. Yes, sir.
It was such a serious business, USDA, Department of Agriculture, actually taught college-type courses just for grading turpentine.
Yep. And additionally, too, turpentine was the largest agricultural business in the United States during this period as well. So it's often, to me, a little bit disheartening because it was so large and it's not talked about as much, but it's exciting. So right here, you have a vintage postcard, which I actually have some of the postcards. Everyone can come up and take a look at this stuff later. What you have here is, you'll see as we talked, we have a guy. This is called dipping and scraping. But what he has here is basically a scrape to get it out of the bowl box. This wasn't depicted when Hurdy pots or any sort of cups were available yet. The other gentleman there, as you see, is chipping, and this is what a typical day in the turpentine woods look like. So after those gentlemen, if you see, that guy, he doesn't have a cup, but he has basically a big pail. Even when the cups were invented, there would still be gentlemen that would go around the woods with the big pails. And as the workers were going and they were emptying their cups, he would go around, put it into his pail, and then he would take that and then put them into barrels for transport. So you had a few different positions, everyone kind of rotated a little bit, and then there was usually one overseer for the entire operation, known as a woods rider, who did exactly what he sounded like, rode around the woods on a horse and made sure that everything was going okay. I don't know how else to describe this, but just, this is some hellacious work. So you got a woman here, it looks like, gathering turpentine from the base. You got a guy up top there, he's chipping all the way up in the top of the tree. You got your other guy over there dumping barrel, putting it into the barrel for transport. And you got this poor fella, he's pushing them up into the wagon. These things had to have weighed, hundreds of pounds, but imagine what a full barrel feels like. And then additionally too, that's just where the fun ends. What you don't see in this picture is the terribly cut, non-paved road that they have to take it out of. I brought the gator because I wanted you guys to understand that where they were working at was swampy conditions, right? So a lot of times, even if you cut a road, you'd have to then build another road to get to the area that you're going. Me and Preston have talked about it. There's a few different spots in the region that have what's called corduroy road, and that is basically just laid out sticks that didn't sink into the mud. So when you rode your carriage over it, you were able to make it out. This was very, very swampy areas that they were working in, as well as upland pine habitat that was very dry. It varied depending upon where you were. You know, if you were middle of Georgia, probably a little bit more piney forest. If you're on the coast like we are, you can almost assure that there's going to be some mud and you're going to get your knee stuck into it because that's how deep you're going to fall. So here's another picture of kind of the crew out there. As you see, you got some gentlemen on the horse, you got your workers walking around. This was kind of like a little roving posse. So as I said, the crop was 10,000 trees. Can't get it done all in one day. They would just start on one side of the property, work their way, work back, you know, just kind of mosey around. But they usually stayed together from all my research as a localized unit, mainly because, you know, some of these people were leased convicts later on, so they didn't want them running away. They didn't want the African-American folks running away, period, and they just wanted to maintain their operation. So a lot of times they would just be out there, there'd be a guy riding around on the horse following. So after you got out of the woods, this is a picture of a gentleman checking the barrels. This is getting ready for the distillery process. We had refinement processes here locally, but it wasn't refinement to get it to medicine grade or for like final product. It was more refinement to just clean it up a little to ship it off to a processor that then moved on and handled it. I don't know where this picture was taken, but Preston, correct me if I'm wrong on this. The big turpentine processing plant, if you will, was in Savannah, Georgia, and there was another one somewhere else over there too in Georgia. I forget where it was. Where was it? That's why he's our city historian. And I'm just, yeah, so these guys get it ready. This is what the average still looked like, give or take. They heat it up, get it all down, get it refined. Like I said, very, very, very dangerous. Turpentine is flammable. Best be careful, man. So this is a picture of a still in flames. Extremely dangerous. The last time that a still operation was done, unless I don't have some knowledge that someone else has, one of the universities in Georgia had a still that they were doing research with. They talked to the still operators and they fired it back up and did like a whole recreation of it. And the guy in the video even said, I think this is the first time it's been done in however long. This was in like 1990, so he said like 25 years at that point. Extremely, extremely dangerous. But if you made it through the still process, you didn't catch on fire, have no fear. There are other ways that your turpentine crop can get destroyed. Hurricanes, right? We're in Florida, hurricanes. You're out there, you're chipping, you got a nice tree, you're getting ready to harvest, they all get crushed and knocked down. There goes your harvest for the year. Additionally, there's another type of fire that we have to be concerned about, not the man-made one, the wildfires. Nothing worse than killing a turpentine crop with a whole bunch of fire. From the accounts that I have read, it actually made the turpentine smell a little burnt flavored, and therefore when they tried to put it into medicines and stuff like that, the refinement process couldn't get out that burnt flavor, and therefore they weren't able to use it. But I guess they still would kind of use some of it for paint varnish and thinner removal and stuff. Okay, got another trivia question for you guys. Fire, bad in all forms. Hurricane, bad. But what ended the turpentine industry? Anyone have any guesses on that? We'll wait on you, city historian.
I was going to say infestation.
Infestation, that's possible. Pine tree's pretty resistant to bugs. Anyone else? What'd you say it was? Partially. The initial crux was that wood ships just weren't being built anymore, right? We had different materials. They started using the metal, as well as the oil industry. You had different types of products. You didn't have to use turpentine anymore. But the number one killer to the turpentine industry is land development. At least in my eyes. Can anyone tell me where this picture is? Where? Yeah, so this is over at the small bridge before you get to the four-way. If you see, all those woods that are now the C-section, at the end, right? So convict leasing wasn't a thing, obviously. African Americans were not able to be utilized in the same that they were. So it led to an issue of, is it cost effective? Not really. What is? Selling land to developers. Welcome to Pumpkins. So after they sold off all the pine land, they got out of the business, and since then the turpentine operations have effectively been nil. There's a few ones that do, that still like tap and harvest. They don't distill for like educational purposes. But other than that, the industry is effectively extinct. As I said before, the reason I wanted to put up this picture is when I say Flagler County, it was literally all turpentine industry. I mean, the entire bit of Flagler County was turpentine industry. Someone who walked in and said you don't find those in the woods very often. Wrong, sir. I'm sorry to call you out. The boy sitting behind you found a piece of it in our backyard in the B section a couple months ago. So there are literally chips of herby pods everywhere in this area. You just look around. Never know what you'll find. So yeah, environmental regulation, over-harvesting, poor management, civil rights, and most importantly, the value of timberland increased. Therefore, it exploded. Whoa, where did we? Oh my goodness, where did I just do? So sorry. This is not my computer, so I'm not used to it. Okay, so I want to leave you guys with a little thing that I personally researched and found, and I thought it was very exciting because it was local here. Sheriff's office. Does anyone know what happened to our first sheriff? He was killed. He was killed. Do you know who he was killed by? No, not the second sheriff. He was actually killed by a turpentine worker, and the turpentine worker was running moonshine. Sheriff pulled him over. Yes, you can then figure out how that story goes. So this was recently declassified, released from the Florida State Congressional. It says Perry Hall, Sheriff in Flagler County. If you notice an interesting part, Brunel, not Bunnell. Brunel was a common misspelling of Flagler County for people who weren't from the area, because just like anywhere, when you went somewhere, you said, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Brunel. Sounds like Brunel, so some guy from the north probably heard it that way. Perry Hall, Sheriff, killed by Jim Smith, Negro turpentine labor on August 20th, 1927. Sonny Durrance, a deputy sheriff, was also killed by Jim Smith's nephew. So this was a whole family affair as well, right? The night watchman at the Negro post office. Jim Smith, turpentine laborer, was then killed by a posse in Georgia 2 weeks after killing Sheriff Perry Hall. Total dead, 3. And I'm going to leave you guys with a quick story. I have the kind of like the police report from it if you guys want to hear it real quick. So, justice overtakes the guilty sooner or later was again demonstrated Sunday afternoon when a posse attempting to arrest Jim Smith, alias G.O. Jones, slayer of the late Sheriff Perry Hall, shot the Negro to death in Brooksfield, Georgia, according to OO. I don't know what OO stands for. Thomas, special deputy, who was in the posse. Jim Smith, and was known as Brookfield as George Jones. He killed Sheriff Hall while Sheriff was making a raid on a Negro joint at Roy in the northwestern part of the county on the night of August 20th. The Negro had told here before the murder that he once resided in Tifton, Georgia, and officers there were notified at the time the crime was committed. It was also known that either relatives of himself or wife lived at Brooksfield. According to Mr. Thomas, he went to Brookfield on Sunday, September 4th, and sent word to his wife here to join him at Brookfield. Deputy Thomas followed the woman to Tifton. In the meantime, the Georgia officers had learned that Smith was in Brookfield and made a search for him Saturday night but failed to locate him. Smith, it was said, had a double-barreled shotgun which he kept with him at all times ready to use. Sunday afternoon, the officers learned that Smith was in the house of John Chapman in the turpentine still quarters of Bowen and Harrell at Brookfield, and the house was surrounded by a posse consisting of Deputy Sheriff Thomas and Sheriff J.O. Thrasher, as well as Deputy Sheriff Chesley Thompson Chief of Police Preston Morgan, J.G. Nelson, and Commissioner N.L. Corsery all went to Tift County, Georgia. When the two officers went in front of the house, Smith ran out the back, and he was shot down when he refused to halt. Deputy Thomas stated that the man ran about 100 yards. After the death, the body was identified by Smith's wife and others who knew him in Brookfield. Deputy Thomas carried the body to Tifton and had it embalmed and brought back here. Arriving Monday afternoon, where it was further identified by a number of Flagler County white men and several Negroes who knew him here. The body was buried Tuesday morning by county convicts. No doubts are entertained here about him being the one behind the murder. It was reported by Mr. Thomas that the murderer, after arriving, had bragged on numerous occasions of what he would do if the officers gave him. And we did not give him the chance to make good on his boasts. So, we had an undersheriff killed here, and then we also had the deputy killed. Preston, correct me if I'm wrong, Roy is right on the northern part of Flagler County, kind of abuts to the St. Johns County line over near Hastings. I don't know how familiar you guys are with the area, but Hastings over in Flagler Estates, it's kind of tucked up into there. And he was hidden at the original story, this was the chase part. The original part was he went in to bust an undercover moonshine operation. The guy leaned down, he was holding a bottle, and he came up and just whacked him in the head, whacked the sheriff in the head with the bottle and killed him. So that's kind of what set off this whole hunt. But
bodies were really, really thick, and I guess it was common weapon. This one filled with sand, and when he struck him, he actually cracked his skull, and part of the skull went into the brain. They got him to the hospital in Alaska, and they took him to St. Augustine. We didn't have a hospital there, and he died about 12 hours later. Deputy Durant, this story is kind of silly. He was killed by the night watchman who mistook him for a burglar at the post office. Durant thought that the guy that killed him, was actually the bad guy. And they had a shootout, and the night watchman was basically a guard, killed Durant, and profusely apologized for it. And it's just a case of mistaken identity, so it wasn't like a revenge type thing. Yeah.
But what happened to Jim Smith though at that time? They wouldn't have let him off.
no, he was killed.
He took off.
The nephew, I'm sorry.
The nephew was put on trial and quit.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
It was pure accident, deadly accident. Yeah, Jim Smith took off. He was trying to go part of the route he went up to Georgia. He was trucking through the swamps. And he made it there a pretty good time, wasn't too late. You're not going to take him to a live college just like in the movies. Instead of shooting, he ran and come to probably about 20 times.
Shot him. Yeah, oftentimes, the Wild West, right? But people often don't necessarily acknowledge that, like, Florida was truly the Wild West at one point. There was the whole integration of how, this was effectively swampland that wasn't developed. It was hard to patrol. It still is, right? You go walk around in the woods and I'll start running away from you, see how long it takes me to find, right? Imagine there's no roads, there's only a couple, right? Dixie Highway, the Pershings, a few. Very in and out type of community. So to just take off and make a line to Georgia, more power to you. With that being said, thank you all for coming. I would be happy to take any questions. We also have, real quick too, we have some artifacts that I'll touch on. If you guys, if anyone afterwards wants to come up and take a look, we'd be more than happy to show you everything. There's some buttons, some marbles. I killed that deer. That's about it. Also too, before we start taking questions, if you want, my girlfriend has the raffle tickets. We are actually raffling off a authentic Purdy cup that was found right here in Flagler County. Tickets are $1 a piece. All proceeds go to the Historical Society if anyone would like to get some. We got a few in here, so someone's going to take it out and win it. But if you'd like to get some tickets, we'll do that. I'll take any questions though for right now if you have, sure.
I have two questions.
Sure.
So
I may have two answers.
You will.
Okay.
When you think about turpentine, you know, it's a very pungent, horrible smell.
It is.
So when it is removed from the trees in its natural, you know, what would it smell like out there in that heat? And then, the trees as harvesting, do they last how many years? Does it keep, you know, are they dead?
Let me start with the first one. I have no idea what, I can imagine, at one of like the shipping facilities in Savannah where they had hundreds and hundreds of it, I could imagine it was probably a pretty pungent smell. As far as in the woods, it doesn't, it doesn't really.
People would touch it, but they get sick from that.
No, but you'll have some very stiff.
And sticky hands, yeah. The real dangers of like, what I think you're thinking of is just like the fumes and the smell. That would have all been at like the distilling, refinement type process, but in the woods, not so much. The second part of your question is a super loaded question. How long do they last? There are still trees right now that are alive that have cat faces in them. So some are, it depends. I think Crystal, my girlfriend, is a good witness to this. A lot of times if they survive, the cat face will actually get grown back over. So the tree will like incorporate it. Preston's known for taking a metal detector and wand in a tree just to see if there's any nails or anything inside of it. That usually gives you a good tell. There's other trees that I've seen that, you know, they only grew, they were probably at the bare minimum at the 10-inch mark to harvest, and for some reason they either got knocked over or they died. When they switched to the hardy cups, the process became a lot less destructive. When they were digging out the bases of the trees, it was just killing the trees. So, hope that.
Have you done some research, relationship with Flagler County and how they communicate to us here? Do we know, that, the spot that, Turpentine industry has Flagler built the rail line down to the canal, right? Included it, right? Created a situation where a lot of people, developed the beach, right? Made their money off of Turpentine. And so my question is, have you done history as to how big the industry actually was in Flagler County?
As far as like numbers, as far as like generating, or just expansiveness? Because expansiveness is pretty much the whole county.
It's touted as one of the reasons that the people that developed the beach, right? Made tremendous amounts of money off of Turpentine, and I'm just wondering if you know if that was probably the case.
It would have been Moody, it would have been DuPont, it would have been, or I'm sorry, Wadsworth, it would have been Strickland, yeah, Mel Strickland. I mean, there's the names that you hear are the names that were in operation. The street named after them in Bunnell is all the verification you need. Yeah. Well, and what me and Preston are actually have been talking about, not exactly started working on yet, is we are trying to figure out, because Palm Coast, the original 43,000 acres roughly, was purchased at one time, give or take. So we're trying to figure out what they paid per acre. Like, what did ITT pay per acre for that 43,000 acres? And then figure out without like doxing the families of what they got, like figure out how much this land would have been valued, because we're trying to determine what the actual economic impact was. As far as a better answer, as far as like what they made, I don't know, but it was, when they say Palm Coast was all turpentine, it was almost every square inch of it was. Either that or a hunting club. There wasn't much of it. Yeah, sure.
Y'all are actually sitting on a turpentine camp.
There you go.
I'm used to being outside in the woods, and I don't talk to anybody except for the trees, and they don't talk back. How many people know about St. Joe Canal or St. Joe Shopping Center? St. Joe was a turpentine camp started by Lou Wadsworth's father. Lou Wadsworth was who sold the land of ITT. This was St. Joe's Still, was the name of the town. It ran down to Lanier Park. The picture, I wish you could pull the picture back up, of the Turpentine camp. Nope, no, sort of. It would have looked like that, without the railroad. Palm Coast Parkway was St. Joe Grade, which would have been our version of the railroad. But it would have been houses like that. We had a church, we had a school. The school is where a racetrack is. Church is where Wawa is, I believe. But yeah, this was a big camp. The turpentine industry actually shut down after World War II because they started making a chemical version of it. Did you say that? Oh, listen to you. And it was a whole lot cheaper to make a chemical version than to pay people to go out to do this job. But yeah, we're sitting on a turpentine camp here.
So there's the Bulow Creek, or Bulow Plantation that had the whole layout of the Turpentine distillery, right?
Bulow was a sugar.
Oh, it was sugar.
But turpentine was being harvested there. When you go down Beach Road, if you look off to the left, you'll see some catfish trees.
So with the, so they used the boats to get it out, right? So would the turpentine go to Savannah via train or boat?
Both. It depends on the period. They start out with boats and then it got loaded on the trains.
Because both Darien report as well, right?
Kings Bay, you know where Kings Bay is, goes into Darien, but
There's a very nice turpentine still exhibit in Barberville, if anybody's interested in going down there. It's not
operational.
Florida, but I think it came from Georgia, it was moved down there, but it depicts a fine turpentine still.
Believe it or not, that turpentine still was supposed to be at the Ag Museum originally. And there was I'm not going to say what all happened there. It went to Barberville. If you ever go out there, one of the cool things that they do with turpentine is make rosin potatoes. They coat the potatoes in pine pitch, pine rosin, that's the sap that comes out, and then cook them in a fire. And it's the most unique tasting potatoes. It's not poison or something. It has a very pungent flavor. I like them, some people don't. Some of us like gator, some don't. He cooks a mean gator, by the way. But yeah, the slaves, the convicts, the people they hired, that was one of the ways they cooked food was coating it in rosin and throwing it in fire. It was like a pressure cooker of the day.
Anything else? Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
By the way, the turpentine still, Forest St. Joe still is where a craft railroad
Was. And that is our city historian, ladies and gentlemen. Any other questions? In the back. Oh, sorry, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, ladies first.
After World War II, there was a huge housing boom, which required lumber. So weren't the trees more valuable for lumber at that point?
That also is one of the other things is while the land was being sold off for development and other things, they would then clear the land, use it for lumber. There was a mix. One thing to jump back into, thank you for reminding me because I forgot a point. As the industry ended, a lot of African Americans were looking for other ways to supplement their income. So they transitioned into the moonshine business a little bit and became the runners for that. Hence how we got to the point of the sheriff's story. Any other questions? Oh, I thought you had a question. My bad. Oh, anyone else? No? In the far corner? And then we'll let Preston tell a story.
Curious about the volume that can be produced from a tree, like how much could you get from a tree, and how much would you take to fill in those barrels?
There, if you'd like to stay after, is a whole fancy math equation in this book. It depends on the month. So it takes heat to do this, right? So in order for the tree to flow, or else it just stays stationary. So in basically April to August was like the critical months that they would harvest it. In April, if it was 40 and the sap wasn't flowing, may not get a lot. There's stories of in July in some of the hottest months on large trees that the cups were basically overflowing, which is why in one of the pictures you had saw, they would actually do 2 cups on a tree with the channels, and that's just to space it out. It's very environmental, right? So some of the pine trees that had more water, more sun, better conditions would obviously produce a little bit more sap as compared to trees that were, in sand or not in the best conditions. It was very dependent upon how much the tree was flowing. But a cup could be filled up like a week, give or take, they were saying, I think. Yeah, like not super long. It was enough that you had to keep like a pretty consistent cycle of it. In addition to, I don't know, I've done a bunch of restoration with all these pots. Sometimes you find them with the turpentine sap still in it. Man, that stuff is hard to get off. So, having not been there, but having scraped a few of these pots clean, my thought process is you probably wouldn't want it to get, if it wasn't really hot, you probably wouldn't want it to get up too much in the cup because it would just be, you break the cups trying to get them out. I'm sure that they had a better method and a lot more efficient at it than I was. But yeah, it's just, because if it gets cold enough, I think it just turns into a solid chunk of like glass, basically. Like it's very, very dense. It's not soft, if you will. So I hope that kind of answers that. Well, that's the other, yes, they would also do that. Sometimes, yeah. There's a, you would think that since it's like sappy, you'd be able to like slowly like scoop it in, but the way you actually do it is, and I didn't invent this, I've read it in a few different books on how to clean these things, is you take like an aggressive sideways manner at scraping it, and it like pops the whole chunk out. It's a very, very tough substance to deal with. Not good to put into your medication, but that's okay. Other question? No, they would use them pretty long. There was different accounts as to how far up they would usually get in a season. If they were being pretty proactive, they could get about, if they started at the bottom, they could get about chest high in a season. And I mean, I've personally seen turpentine trees that the cat face extends past what I could reach. So you have to think that that's at least 2 or 3 seasons on the tree. Now, initially, when there was no conservation of the trees and they didn't have good management practice, yeah, they would go through trees quick, because if you chipped an 8-inch tree or a small tree, that tree is just too much damage for that. It's like anything else, right? You tackle one thing up in a tree and hang something, not a big deal. You put 1,000 nails into the tree, it's going to do a little bit more damage than one singular nail will. But one other thing too, as far as the preparation process, one thing that I didn't have on the slide, because this is just a scraper, you would just take the face of it and they would prep it first before they put the cat face in to get the bark off. There's 2 little handles on each side. You just pull it down and get it fresh. But any other questions? That's all. Anyone else want to put in for our, does anyone else want to purchase any tickets for our Herbie Cup raffle? Mary, you got a few? Anyone? We're gonna draw it. If you'd like to come up, someone's going to take them Herbie Cup. And thank you guys very much. Feel free to come up and look at any of the artifacts we have on the table. I'll hang around for a few minutes. I got to get over to the museum because we're open today. If you guys are bored after this and want to escape the heat, if you could give me like 20 minutes to clean up. The museum is open today. We're over located in Holland Park. There's a bunch of other history stuff in there, not as much turpentine, but a bunch of other history. If you'd like to come by, I will be there shortly, and I'm happy to show you around. So thank you all for coming, and I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking your time out. This is a little Turpentine Junior here. All right. Get your tickets ready for pick one out. All right, read out the numbers.
104138880.
Oops.
We got a winner. Congratulations. All right, and that concludes everything. Thank you all again. I'll be right up there to answer any questions you may have. Better.